realizing that we try to build the athletic profile in a way so that our children are learning teamwork and resilience and competitive spirit and things like that. It doesn't always translate into being a student. It just doesn't. And so it is really helpful for us to deliberately nurture that, right? And what is the language of doing that, right? JD will smile at me right now because I'm always, part of my support of that is we always talk about failure. We're always talking about what mistakes you make. We always talk about what did you fail at today? Why? Yeah, because that's the journey of life. The journey of life is about overcoming failure, right? And so nurturing that, talking about it gives us a sense, really demystifies, right? Some kids have anxiety around the failure of life, have an anxiety around failure in general, making mistakes, a perception around perfection. And so a way to nurture that is really to celebrate, right? The game of failure and how we can go out today and make a bunch of mistakes. Great. Let's talk about it. Let's celebrate it and let's learn from it, right? Realizing that to be a student athlete is far more stressful. It's far more dynamic. It's far more difficult. I have to juggle two really complex worlds, right? I have the learning process of being a student, but also the impact skills to be an effective athlete. And when I mirror them, I have to sacrifice some things that may not want to sacrifice. I may not want to sacrifice sleep or downtime. I may not want to sacrifice, binge watching Netflix. I may not want to sacrifice, 300 clicks deep in YouTube. But if I want to maintain a certain relationship with being a student athlete, then I have to look at my priorities and I have to really build a real focused attention around those decisions, realizing that if I'm empowered to make my own decisions, and as parents, we want our kids doing that. Like when they don't show up to practice a certain day, do you let them just not go? I think there's times when we got to listen to our kids and say, yeah, this is, you got to be able to make your own decisions. If you're not into it today, you're not into it. And especially at a young age, my goodness, you want to burn out. I think, we need to listen to our kids, especially at those younger ages. But as they get older, and obviously finishing what you start, things like that, failing forward is kind of a nice perspective on this, right? Meaning, can I learn through failure? And family dinner time is a great time to do this, have these conversations, especially with younger children, is just, have those moments to celebrate. And yeah, sure, you can talk about successes, what went well today, things like that. Or you can talk about the roses and the thorns of the day, right? Or you can talk about what mistakes and just really just take time to have fun with those conversations and what that starts to demystify in our own kind of family values of life, things like that. It's good stuff because there's no way to get through life without learning through failure. So that also leads into in this kind of like this demystification of failure and really embracing our weaknesses in a way, right? Embracing our disabilities, embracing our attentional challenges, embracing our ADHD. It also helps us to feel more empowered to go out there and problem solve and attack the problems, attack the issues, attack the challenges with a level of confidence and a reassuredness that I'm not defined by my failure. I'm not defined by my disability. I'm not defined by, right? These are just opportunities. These are just potential problems that I can get out there and solve. And how do I start empowering our children in order to do that? One excellent way of doing that, and if you're part of my other presentations, you've heard this before, but I'd love repeating it. It's just so important to remind ourselves that there's a process that we can engage our kids in when we want to help them make decisions. We want to help them own the problem, face the problem, and move through the problem. And one thing we want to not do is own the problem, not a problem, right? If your child is showing up to practice without their helmet, not our problem. I mean, you probably knew they didn't have it when they got in the car, but again, not your problem, right? And how do we foster that level? Well, is just by asking the open-ended questions, right? You got everything? All right, run me through the list of stuff. And then, just practicing this process of thinking and planning and organizing, but maybe you can kind of anticipate the problem and you can kind of get ahead of it a little bit by asking open-ended questions so they come to the conclusion. But sometimes you're not there to solve all their problems, but you can help them acknowledge what's going on. You look stuck. What's the problem? And help them own it and move through it with a level of ownership that builds their self-efficacy, builds their sense of agency, and builds their empowerment in this cognitive, metacognitive process that it's a building blocks, right? The more times I'm solving my own problems, the better I get, right? So that's important. What also becomes important is some of the organizational problems that can just be ubiquitous with some of our children, right? So when a student athlete, they're so busy, they're so scheduled that staying organized becomes really hard. But it becomes helpful to teach and to guide and to instruct and to support the maintenance of organization, right? It's sometimes easy to get organized. What becomes harder is the maintenance of organization. But if I'm independently owning that, I have my, maybe I'm involved with a couple sport athletes, so I have my bag for this, I have my bag for that, and of course I got my school bag. And how am I independently navigating the organizational systems that allow me to be effective in those different worlds? And how do I own it? Because that is mine to own. I can't show up to lacrosse practice every single time, fully dedicated with all of my equipment, and then not show up to class with my pen and pencil, right? Because there are tools of performance. There's tools that are necessary to compete in the classroom and on the pitch. What are those tools, and how do I make sure that I'm accountable to maintaining them and owning them, right? So consistency really being key in this, like just really talking about the language of consistency. You can really frame this out simply around the importance of getting up and making your bed as a mindset that frames out organization of time, tasks, material. Just that one step in the morning creates this initiating process around the order of things. Of course, you're like, yeah, David, I don't make my bed, but that's not about you. But yeah, sure. Maybe we could lead by example as parents, but really about maybe nurturing that one moment of time and space can start to be a building block to other things, right? But there's also the systems of keeping equipment organized. What does that look like? And what is the independent management of that? What is the independent and backpack, things like that? ADLs, there's an organization of activities of daily living. Right? Managing your own laundry is an opportunity to organize the equipment needed to get ready for practice, the equipment needed to get ready for school. And how do I independently own that in terms of my schedule and keeping my clothes organized? And a cool piece is just the cleanup of the dinner, teaching organization of space in a common area of the family really aligns a lot of priorities in terms of values and family values, things like that. So that's really a big deal. Sunday night being another kind of good time stamp to reset and organize for the week. For adults as well, right? So as a family effort, can we do that collectively? Because we're about to jump into a very busy student athlete week. And how do we reset things on a Sunday? Right. And then the language around showing up organized and prepared. It's not just about sports, guys, right? It's also about school. And actually school comes first, right? So it's a student athlete. So how do I show up ready to compete in the classroom? How do I show up ready to compete in school? And what does it look like? What does the organizational systems look like in order to show up? And how do I cultivate that as a parent, right? And so what am I thinking about in the dynamic relationship with both worlds? Right, I have my backpack that has everything I need to compete in the classroom, and I have all my equipment that I need to compete on the turf. Oh, okay. How's my time frame? So, I'm doing pretty great. Okay. This is really the last piece, but take this to your children. It's an excellent mindset tactic and training around really high performing task completion, right? Just imagine that your child embraces the challenge of getting every assignment submitted on time. And they're like, yeah, I've never been able to do that. Well, that's okay. Just imagine they were willing to commit to it. Right? Set the bar high, set the goals high, and then work towards achieving them. Right? And then you're already talking about failure. So you're celebrating the failure in the process, but you're also talking about the grit and the perseverance of committing and the ongoing efforts to reset towards that goal. It's an excellent goal because that's a building block. It requires all other things to work in harmony to get assignments passed in on time. I have to be using tools and processes and strategies to daily maintenance of finishing my day. getting my work checked off, assignments completed, and then I know that I've met the student side of the student athlete profile with zero tolerance. Right? It's a great tactic. It fends off having to catch up, which gets into a really bad pattern with kids. We've moved. Pandemic promoted a lot of time blindness because assignments weren't due dates. There was no due dates. Kids could submit whatever. End of the quarter, everything's getting submitted, and the kids think that they're doing just great. Well, we're getting away from that slowly. There'll be a leap next year into more accountability markers around due dates and things like that. So, because we all know due dates matter. Due dates matter. It's actually one of the most important benchmarks of a life skill is managing the due dates of life. Right? Even your own commitments to your own due dates, but also the world around you when it comes to getting a full-time job someday, right? So having certain types of non-negotiable relationship with yourself around a tolerance policy on what you'll let yourself get away with is really important. So cultivating that at a young age builds that mindset that will lead into all other benefits down the road. So I hope this last slide is helpful and gives you kind of something to think about as well. I was going to talk about this, but it's a different kind of conversation. But so I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me. And those we had a bunch of people that signed up online that weren't going to be able to make it. So I'll send this out to you all, and hopefully this helps you, even your child. It seems like there's parts of this training that would probably help your teenager if they're willing to sit down with you and use this training as a transition point to a conversation. But what questions do we have? What can I tackle with you? We have time right now to answer any questions and see how I can help. Oh, yeah. I'm going to stop.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Leah, for joining.
Have a good night.
Thanks.